Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Akil, and for today's episode, we cover leadership in tech. It doesn't matter whether you're a people manager or a technical leader, what you need is those leadership skills. But which ones are they? How do you get them? And how do you grow into that position starting out as software engineer? Joining me today is Ariel Weinberger, who's a VP of R&D at Application and has over 150,000 students over at Udemy with his courses. I'll put all the links to his socials in the description below. Check him out. And with that being said, enjoy the episode.
Beyond coding.
So you and I met actually when I was applying for a job at AppCam.
Right.
And you were in front of me when I did the interview. I was the interviewee and you were the interviewer. But was that already when you kind of transitioned into engineering manager? Like, what was your role there back then?
Cool. So that's true. You were an interview, and I remember you know, in high regard, basically. I joined AppCam originally as a principal engineer for technical knowledge, basically.
Yeah.
The goal was like, AppCam was a British company, moved over to Amsterdam like a lot of other British companies post-Brexit.
Yeah.
Wanted to set up a development center with engineers and product and all that. And I was the first one to be hired in engineering with some goal of hiring, 10, 12 engineers over the first year. So that was kind of chill. But yeah, and then later on, things scaled quite quickly, and we ended up with about 50 to 60 engineers in the first 1 year.
Yeah.
Consisting of both full-time employees and contractors as well. So yeah,
That's insane.
that was not the original plan. But then I transitioned into a head of engineering role for both the Amsterdam office and the Cambridge office.
Yeah.
So engineers in both sides. We're like a remote first kind of minded company. Yeah.
What? Because I hear principal engineer, I hear staff engineer, front end and back end are kind of obvious technology-wise. But what is the difference between like a principal engineer and just a regular software developer?
Okay, cool. So I think this is a good point to say it really differs per company.
Yeah.
And I think it also depends on the size of the company. Specifically for AppCam, it was a large company. It's been around for over 20 years. It's publicly, traded in 2 stock exchanges. And it has a big it's a big organization.
Yeah.
I would say that the difference. So principal engineer for me is an engineer who has some overarching knowledge over certain discipline or disciplines.
Yeah.
Whether it be front end, back end, infrastructure, cloud, all that. And the idea is not to sit in one team and work on a single product backlog and stuff like that. The idea is to utilize the knowledge to develop a practice.
Okay.
Whether, for example, a front end practice. If you want to hire 5, 6 engineering teams, and in the future, obviously more than that. That's just the first year. Then you want to have that person, who's able to make sure that we follow best practices, that enables other engineers to develop best practices, right?
Yeah.
So it should be an enabler. It should be somebody who's technical. The principal engineers, unlike engineering managers, for example, tend to be very, very technical. They can surgically dive into a problem. And their presence in solving a problem is meant to enable other engineers grow as professionals so that they can take over from that point.
Yeah.
But usually, my experience from principal engineers at the Zone as well, for example, where I worked, it's a very surgical role, supporting role.
Yeah.
They do sit down and write code and experiment. If the business has a big problem they need to solve, like in the Zone's case, micro front ends.
Yeah.
They're one of the pioneers of micro front ends. It's principal engineers that kind of led this thing, experimented with things, broke things, pipelines. And then with the rest of the teams, this vision was developed.
Okay.
So that's kind of the principal engineer role.
Yeah.
And in bigger companies like Amazon, Google and stuff, a principal role is like a guru. It's like an absolute guru. There's like a handful of those in an entire company. So it really differs and depends on the size of the company.
Yeah. But their role is very much like overarching,
Right.
making sure that engineering experience is in place. And kind of pioneering when it comes to best practices and newer tech as well.
Also, yeah. In our case at AppCam, it was a business that's been running for a while, and it was a digital transformation project. So there was a lot going on. It was setting up a new development center.
Yeah.
It was getting into Amsterdam, hiring the talent. It was transitioning from a C# .NET kind of tech stack into a more Node.js, serverless, AWS, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Finding how to glue the two teams. Like obviously we want to move away from the older tech stack, but it exists.
Yeah.
How can we integrate? Can we do it smartly? Can we do it neatly? Can we set up best practices as we do it, or just do it and forget about best practices? But then the next team that joins is doing things differently.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the role,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing. Do you think it's for everyone? Like, because from what I understood and from what I've kind of grown into, I started out as a junior. I didn't have the title, but I very much had the experience of a junior. And then you gain more and more control of what you're doing, right? You don't focus on how you do things. You focus on what you're doing and why you're doing. And for me personally, I figured out, well, the tech thing is actually usually pretty simple because you can boil it down and it doesn't have to be that complex, even though people make it complex. I think the most complex systems are the ones people made it complex because there's a very distinct niche in which you actually need that complexity on a technical level. And then for me, there's either you go more in depth, which I think the principal engineer role would kind of fit into, or you go more high over, right? You go into that management position, the engineering manager role, or what have you. Do you see it that way as well, that principal engineer would be kind of more in depth with regards to technical skills?
Totally. I think principal engineers are, first and foremost, they're technical people, unlike engineering managers who, when they transition into management, it's a new career.
Yeah,
it is a new career. Like you become a junior.
Exactly.
Whereas principal engineers get to retain their day-to-day work and time spent on doing technical stuff.
Yeah.
And if it's for everyone, it depends. I mean, you need to be a leader. It is a leadership role. It's not a managerial role, but it is a leadership role. You need to know how to convey concepts. You need to know how to argue about stuff in a way that enables others to express their opinions. That's very important. You need to be able to dive deep and simplify. So if you're a principal engineer, or we can even take that to more senior engineer roles and certain or staff engineer roles, and again, it differs per company. But you need to have the ability to picking up a ticket on Jira and developing an interface or an API. These are things that are more common. But when your company tries to solve something that hasn't been solved yet, like how to do distributed module federation, or how to introduce micro front ends in a way that wouldn't affect the user experience or minimize the impact on user experience. These are things that require not just an extremely high level of expertise and the ability to convey concepts clearly. It's also like, what do we do next, right? We have this thing, we can discuss it. If you really want good opinions from engineers, you need to make sure they understand it. For them to understand it, you need to know how to convey these concepts. It's like a loop, right?
Yeah.
And then how do we adopt it? Which team should logically go first, because technically it's simpler, right? What languages should we use to solve a specific problem? Like, how do you go? On the one hand, you have the bias of engineers. I want to write Golang. Like, I've heard this in every team ever, because Golang apparently is a fun language.
Yeah.
But then if you consider the vision of the company and the technical challenges it needs to solve to achieve that vision, as a leader in tech, whether it's, again, principal, staff, and stuff, these are some of the considerations you need to take into account. But you're a technical person.
Tech first and foremost.
Tech first, yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Man, it's a lot that's already on the plate of an engineer, right? When it comes to front-end, back-end technology, full stack, or cloud, also what have you with regards to security and testing. But it's a full plate. And then you have that principal engineering role, which you described as also more of a leadership role, right? Making a safe space for others to speak up. And then being a visionary of where new technology will bring us, and if this is the right technology for the company, right? Even that business understanding needs to be there before you can be effective. But we talked in the pre-show, or actually a previous conversation, and like me, you're not very much a reader, right? I don't consider myself a reader. I like to listen. That's also the reason why I listen to podcasts and do one. But how did you cultivate those skills? Like, is it a lot of experimentation for you? Did you have good guidance and leadership in your past? Like, how'd you gain that knowledge first and foremost, and then even those skills?
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm not a reader. The ADHD is a bit of a struggle. I do read on Wikipedia though, a lot. But yeah, reading a book is a bit tough for me. I started as just a software engineer, right? I mean, my first job was a front-end developer with Angular.js. Then I transitioned to Angular.
Yeah.
Then I started working at DAZN, where I became a senior front-end engineer. I really wanted to transition to the back end because scale, millions of daily users was really attractive to me. I got heavily involved. I spent some time in the developer experience team at DAZN, in the platform team. I got to touch everything. I mean, I'm self-taught, so I don't have a degree in computer science or anything. I just really loved creating stuff.
Yeah.
But I also got bored very quickly.
Okay.
So, I learned HTML and CSS, and then that got kind of boring. How can I make it more attractive? I learned JavaScript, or interactive rather. I want to make my front end flow easier, so I learned React, or I wanna be able to develop backend services that will scale without me having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And for my team to own it. So we went more towards the serverless kind of thing. And I just really like learning stuff when they're useful for the job I'm trying to, for the task I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
With regards to the leadership aspects, I don't know. I guess I was always like, whenever I was in a team, I don't know, product managers used to tell me that I'm a very product-minded engineer, and that they can talk to me about the customer's needs. And I did see that there is a tendency for engineers to look for like roller coasters, like, no, we shouldn't go for TypeScript because it's, we need to stick to bare metal. And I don't know, things like we should we should test absolutely everything. And I just liked focusing on delivery on one hand and understanding that developing code is an evolution, and or an evolutionary process rather. Yeah. You do something today, in 2 weeks you'll do something else. You will naturally acquire some tech debt. And I always kind of like the balance. And I don't know, I always, when we had team conversations and stuff like that, I liked focusing on what matters. Yeah. And not on like all these discussions of should we have TSLint, ignore lines in text, like great conversations, but I always liked focusing on the higher level. And I guess that kind of helped me develop those leadership skills. I always liked, transmitting knowledge to people and educating. When I was at DAZN, we had, Hack Your Future. I don't know if you know that organization. No. Basically, refugees, people with refugee background from Syria, from Iraq, from other countries, who came over to the Netherlands. Hack Your Future trains them to become software engineers, and then they get an internship at companies in the Netherlands and in other places around the world. Nice. And when Evie, the head of people at DAZN, told me that we might join this program and mentor them, I was like, I want to do that, Yeah. So I always jump in for mentorship. That's something I absolutely love. I love being mentored as well. I have a mentor. I've had one for over a year now, and I'm looking forward to their sessions. I really believe in mentorship. Yeah. And that it's just not possible that we know everything. Exactly. And even if we think we know something, let's hear somebody else. Because if somebody tells you something and you're in the same team with them, and you maybe they're your ex-colleague or your manager or whatever, even if you don't agree with 100% of what they say, there's no chance that you disagree with 100% of what they say. Like some of what they say must be true. Yeah. To some extent. I think at least hearing it, even though you think you disagree, like remove that bias. These are the things that I was actively seeking as an engineer, because I saw bias in teams that I was a part of, and that was a productivity killer.
Yeah, I recognize a lot of myself in what you said when it comes to wanting to be effective in whatever we're doing, right? If that's delivering a product to a client, obviously you want to deliver the best product, but also it needs to match whatever the client wants, right? And if we can build a really cool technical feature, but no one's going to use it, I'll be the first one to say, do we actually need this? Because I don't think anyone's going to use it. But not every engineer is like that. So I recognize that it takes a certain perspective, and I think a certain, I don't know, I think it's interest or curiosity rather, that you can use to, I don't know, have insights in that.
Your goal needs to be not just to write code and have the most beautiful code. You need to make it, your goal also needs to be help the other team, unblock their dependency if you're the dependency. Help other teammates find solutions to their problems, learn stuff, improve processes, make your pipelines faster, deliver faster, write less tests, but deliver high quality software. You need to find those things that will ultimately benefit the business and not just the code that you put on GitHub. If you know what I mean? Like code is one of the things that don't quite matter as much as other things when you get into leadership.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's management or principal engineer or whatever it is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at the end. Yeah. But I mean, I recognize also what you said when you get kind of bored from a certain technology and you want to move on to something new, right? Learn that kind of unknown thing. And at some point you're like, okay, I'm comfortable in that. And then you move on to the next one as well. I kind of see it as like you go from 0 to 100. I'll never get to that 100%. I don't think I will. I'll get to like 60, 70 when I'm comfortable and I'll move on. And when I really need that last 30% of knowledge, I know exactly who to bring in because I know that that's their thing, right? They're either a master in front end or back end, or when it comes to infrastructure or platform, I'll bring those guys in.
That's exactly that.
Yeah.
I'm doing it these days, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Because what's your role currently then? Is it still principal engineer or have you moved on since?
No, so I'm a VP R&D
Yeah.
at a startup called Amplication.
Yeah.
Basically, what we do is we want to change the way engineers develop software or the way software is developed. What we do is we're a platform where you basically design your systems and your software in microservices or monoliths or whatever you like.
Yeah.
With a nice cloud-based UI. We're open source as well, by the way. So fully open source, fully open.
Nice.
And we save you a lot of time. Like when you want to bootstrap a new microservices or a new application, you can use Amplication to set up your entities, set up your permissions, your authentication, authorization. You can configure Kafka and configure Redis and configure Postgres and whatever database you like and customize it to your needs, and we'll generate code for you.
Yeah.
So you own the code. We're not like a cloud service where you're going to deploy your code with us, but we're going to make your life easier. And trust me, I've had conversations with companies that spent years trying to do a tiny portion of that, and that cost them millions. So it's pretty cool. Like I've been using it myself for a while, and you just move so quickly. And our motto is code what matters,
Nice.
rather than boilerplate.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'll check it out after. But you have the role of, would you say VP of R&D?
Yeah.
Is it like a managerial role or is it like a technical leadership role? What is that?
So it's a managerial role.
Yeah.
We're very small right now. So, about 16 people.
Yeah.
So in my role, I report to the CEO, and I'm basically in charge of the R&D organization. That's like engineering. How do we, what technologies do we use? How do we set up our engineering teams to deliver our product? Do we need one team? Do we need three?
Yeah.
What kind of skills do we need to have in the team? Helping teams figure out best practices. I think at this stage of the company, it's very like flat, right? So I'm with the team every day, all day. And I do get to code a tiny bit, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, my goal is to set up the organization for success and growth.
Yeah.
Because if things keep going the way they go, we'll likely grow and need to hire more folks in. And I want to make sure we have a solid core. We have good practices. We're very, visible outwards.
Yeah.
We're an open source company. We generate code for companies, and we got to make sure we take that responsibility seriously and do it right.
Yeah, interesting. Because I'll be honest with you. When I met you for the first time, we were in a kind of an interview session, and obviously you asked questions of the things that you expect me to know. But if I didn't know, I would just be honest and say that. And you would explain it to me in such a simple way, and it didn't matter if it was front end, back end. When it comes to infrastructure or where the code actually runs on, right, Docker or Kubernetes, I figured you would know it and you could explain it in a very simple way. So when you mentioned you've moved on to kind of a managerial position, that's quite interesting because I did not expect you to do that. Obviously, our first meeting was very brief, but I thought you were one of those like real technical guys back then. Why did you transition, or how did you transition? I'm assuming it was at AppCam, since you mentioned you kind of became head of engineering there.
Yeah, so I was actually an engineering manager before AppCam at a company that you might know called OneFit.
Don't know, man.
Yeah,
No.
OneFit is some fitness related solution in the Netherlands. I was an engineering manager there, and I kind of took leadership of the process of pivoting during COVID as well. So that was my first managerial experience. Was a fantastic project, by the way. But then I did think that I want to get into a more like technical role, and that's why my next role at AppCam was a more principal engineer role.
Yeah.
And the circumstances were such that we need to grow to deliver what we need to deliver.
Yeah.
And naturally, I became head of engineering. I mean, I was up for that. I like working with people. I like having a close relationship with people. I like talking to people.
Yeah.
I really believe in this thing called people, because if we don't have people, Yeah, that's not going to work. So
Yeah.
teams, how do you, I had some important vision there about micro front ends, microservices. That's exactly what we did, which was very technical on one hand, but on the other hand, you're going to make sure you have the right people at the
Exactly.
company. You're going to make sure you have the right leaders as well. So yeah, I was totally up for that, for the head of engineering role. It did get me farther than I had hoped from coding.
Yeah.
But in my current role, and that's something, and that's where I mean, what I mean when I say it differs per company.
Yeah.
I know that for a long time, where I am now, I'm going to get to be very technical and to the level that I want to be. I like experimenting with stuff, right?
Yeah.
Over the past 2 weeks, I've spent my free time and in between trying to figure out how can I get the engineers to be like super productive,
Yeah.
and develop directly on the cloud. Like this is the kind of stuff I'm passionate about. I don't think it's right for me to go and pick up like a task and block the entire team because there is a dependency on some release. I don't have the time for that. So I'm trying to figure out where can I use like kind of my higher level overview and bird's eye view of things without blocking engineers, yet giving them value and making them more productive, helping them with decisions. So yeah, not quite coding, but I like that. I like having impact on people and I like learning from people.
Really cool. Yeah, really cool. You're still an enabler, but on a very technical level in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. So I want to go back to the hiring process because you said you scaled the team from, it was expected to be like 15 people or 2 teams in a very short time into a team of like 50 or 60. I don't know the exact numbers, but even your hiring to me was very different because obviously I was on the other side of the thing. We had one conversation and then we had a conversation. It was kind of a live coding session, but I didn't really feel, how do you say that? I don't look forward to live coding sessions. I think they're very intimidating. Someone sits on the other end, and I've seen like stuff on YouTube, which is appalling, where people just get roasted and they're like, you don't get it. It's supposed to go like this. And you're like, well, this also works. And then they still don't agree. But your take was very, very different. Was that the only 2 rounds or did you do 3 rounds? What's your take on that?
With coding, probably 1 round.
1 round.
Yeah, right. So my take on coding is that the code that you write is actually like, I don't know, 30% of the interview.
Yeah.
I do think it's important that engineers will know how to code. But, when you're interviewed, there's stress involved. Maybe coincidentally, I'm asking you something that you just forgot. I mean, this happens. You're not a robot.
Yeah.
So my focus on hiring, and that's also, what I communicated back to the hiring team as well as the team grew. The code matters, but not that much.
Yeah.
What kind of questions do you ask, right? How curious are you? How collaborative are you? I will never ask you a coding question expecting a specific answer because that's bad. Because I want to hire a good engineer, not an engineer who knows specifically that specific answer that I asked.
Like a trick.
Exactly. I mean, my point is to set you up for success, right? And I want to get the best version of you as a candidate. And I want you to feel comfortable. And that's always what I told people during interviews. I don't care if the code is going to run. I'm not even going to run it.
Yeah.
I want to see how you think. I want to see like what's automatic for you. How do you speak up your thoughts? What kind of questions do you ask? How do you solve a problem, basically, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we do. I mean, we solve problems. Code is a tiny bit of it. What about documentation? What about priorities? What about dependency management, right?
Yeah.
Asking your product manager questions to understand the user better. These are the kind of things that I like putting focus on. I think it's quite easy to understand if somebody knows how to code.
Yeah. Yeah. Yet no one does it like that. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews because I sucked at it and I wanted to get better. So just for the sake of interviewing, I sometimes interview. And especially at the beginning, because man, the idea of someone sitting in front of me and judging whatever I'm saying, right? If it's a tell me about yourself or if it's a coding question and I don't know it, it didn't feel good. So to get more comfortable with that, I might not even have gotten better in interviewing. I just got more comfortable. I would do interviews, but very much the technical interviews would be kind of confronting to me. And everyone, I mean, if you look at the biggest companies, right, they have multiple rounds of either interviewing. You don't even get to talk to a person. Sometimes you get like a hacker rank kind of thing you have to do. And then afterwards, you either get rejected by some automated system or then you get to talk to someone. And then still you have to do a whiteboard session or like a system design thing. It's so many rounds, very much technical. No one asks those questions that you ask. Like even do you challenge the product owner or what do you think of dependency management or how do you collaborate? That usually doesn't come as much to the forefront as I think it should.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because I know that people can learn how to code. If you're a fantastic engineer and you've been working with, I don't know, Kotlin or Java for the past 7 years, and you know how to design scalable microservices using, I don't know, tools that we use like Kafka and RabbitMQ and AWS, it doesn't make sense to ask you questions about Node that you will likely don't know.
Yeah.
Because that's not the value I would get from you. You can learn Node. You can learn JavaScript in a few weeks if you're a solid engineer. And I don't want to set you up for failure. And let me tell you something funny, actually. When I joined DAZN, it's exactly when they came over from the UK as well.
Yeah.
I think it was the engineer, the 13th engineer in Amsterdam. And the hiring goal for that year was 120 engineers.
For a year.
Right.
That's crazy.
That was huge. And it happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was insane. Like
that's legit.
Hyper growth, I guess. And we all got training on how to hire people. We got it by again, Evie. She was the head of people. She was she had a senior people role in Booking.com before, and like I remember it as one of the most impactful trainings I've had.
Yeah,
it's like, can you compensate for hard skills? Yes. Like lack of hard skills, absolutely. I would rather hire somebody with slightly average or above average hard skills, but excellent soft skills.
Yeah.
That was like, I remember a specific chart that you drew, which is like, hard skills versus soft skills and what's easier to compensate and what we want. And that was very impactful for me. And, before I joined DAZN, I had a very, very technical hiring process. It was super technical, very deep dive, very codey, super fun, I have to say. Like a lot of, you solve something and then you get another constraint and another constraint. And how do you hash it? And how do you make it more efficient? And
yeah, it goes deep.
I just happened to know the answers to get the job. But then when I started hiring and I saw the question bank, I was like, I don't know 80% of that.
Really?
I felt so lucky.
Yeah.
And that's the place where, I was super productive there. I've led a lot of initiatives there. I was really, really productive there and learned a lot. But I could have, if somebody else would ask me a different question, pretty sure I wouldn't get the job.
Interesting.
Pretty sure I wouldn't get a job because the questions there, like some of them were really tough.
Yeah.
Right. So, and they were all like labeled as senior engineer role, questions. So that's what I mean by that. And I did take a lot of good stuff from the hiring process there, but what I didn't take is like these very specific questions.
Yeah.
That are looking for specific answers. I don't think it tells us much about engineers.
Yeah, I agree. I'm wondering what it's going to trend towards. I think now, first there was a hiring boom, right? Because the salaries went up, people were transitioning left and right. People that could hire the fastest probably also got a lot of people the fastest. Now it's happening that people are getting laid off more. I'm seeing on LinkedIn posts of several engineers at bigger companies being laid off. So I don't know how the hiring process is going to evolve. But what I want to get into is when you scale a team from, let's say, 10 people to 100 people or even 50, there's going to be a lot of growth pains. That's what I would assume.
Yeah.
What have you seen kind of with regards to growth pains, and how do you make sure people stay effective?
So I've seen that happening at DAZN.
Yeah.
I think it was managed in a not so bad way.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly details, but I remember that when I joined DAZN, our team split 3 times. So I think that was managed pretty well. The team became too big.
Yeah. People
became dependencies of each other. And the decision was very quick to split and then to split again. And the split always kind of makes sense to me.
Okay.
So that was good. But with AppCam specifically, we had some challenges because some of the engineers were in Cambridge.
Yeah.
We really valued those engineers. And we didn't want to, they only knew C#. So a part of it was like a time for training. So they needed to upskill. Some of them had great leadership, qualities that it wouldn't, we want to keep them, right? And use their leadership skills. They can learn how to code in JavaScript. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then in Amsterdam as well, I think my focus, based on what I saw, before, is that how do we retain that DNA that we have? Like we're at a luxury at this very early stage of like one person, basically, of cherry picking the people that we want to have. We paid very decently, which kind of helps. And my focus was on finding the rock stars.
Okay.
I knew some folks from my past jobs and stuff like that. I managed to identify within AppCam some of the existing handful of engineers one or two rock stars that are just have this amazing can-do mindset, can kind of roll up their sleeves. If you got to do Kubernetes, then you will do it. If you got to do microservices and Node, you'll do it.
Yeah.
It was really, identifying this core that I think represents what I want this organization to be and what I want the interview process to feel like for people. I want them to, whether they got the job or not, to leave thinking, wow, that was fun. That was different. So it was hard identifying those and hiring those. But once we got those, and that's also what I'm doing in my current job, right?
Yeah.
I'm telling my folks, guys, you can code, great, but that's not what's going to make us
Successful.
a successful team.
Yeah.
It's how you communicate. It's how do you resolve dependencies. Bias for action. One of the most important things for me. There's something, just do it.
Yeah.
Of course, not everything is like that, but so many times I've seen in places like a small thing, just a low-hanging fruit, just pick up that fruit, solve the problem.
Yeah.
And earn your champion points. I don't know.
Exactly.
Identifying this core set of people made scaling so much easier. We were aligned on microservices, micro front ends, the technologies we use. We actually never documented the set of technologies we use because we were so aligned that we didn't have to do that.
Interesting.
Everybody was using TypeScript. Everybody was using serverless. Not that I'm saying that necessarily technically it's right or wrong, but the level of alignment there was so solid. It was it was like a harmony, right? And then these people became the leaders of their squads. And I think, that's kind of my focus today as well. I want to make sure that the core is super strong because when we hire 20, 30 more people in, we need to have that strong core. Otherwise, we're going to have like some DNA disruptions and it's going to feel a bit clunky. And I want to keep that solid.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love that you said DNA because I think that would be one of the best answers, right? I'm a consultant right now, so I jump from team to team and I talk to colleagues who also do that. And when there's a DNA mismatch, you'll notice it. You'll be like, their mindset is just completely different and their perspective is so opposed to mine that we just don't match, right? There's a DNA mismatch there. Yeah. So if you make sure your core is solid, right? If that DNA is the same, then it will also spread out and they will seek the same mindset of people in that way. And I think you kind of constrain your growth pains in that way, which is really cool in that way as well.
And it's easier if you accept the fact that people will make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because I've also seen places where, you have the title of a manager and on paper you have the responsibilities of a manager. But if your manager doesn't like exactly what you're doing, it just makes the process so much more tiring. So you hire people for who they are.
Yeah.
You understand that they're good engineers. You understand that their thoughts are different and their background is different. And as a manager and also senior manager, you need to, know really well what are my core, most important things that I don't compromise on.
Yeah.
And what are things that I just let my people, do their thing, perhaps be super successful, perhaps make mistakes, but I'm going to hire the right people who, if they failed at something, they can just learn from it and share the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if you try to shield people from making mistakes, I mean, humans don't scale. And as a senior manager who's micromanaging others, you're not gonna have a great time.
Exactly.
People are gonna be angry. Things are just not gonna work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when it comes to making mistakes, I'm trying to write more on LinkedIn and stuff. So I was writing this on the train, but I remember very distinctly when I was on operations, I did the worst thing you can do, which is basically make a huge mess from production. And I knew it happened. I was trying to solve it as quickly as I could before someone noticed it. But obviously, someone was running standby and they immediately got an alert on their phone. They called me and they said, what happened? And I explained it to them. And they were very chill about it. They were like, I'll fix it and I'll walk to your desk in a bit. And basically, I was going through all the scenarios when I was like, okay, is this how I get fired? Because I was very junior. It was my first year. Am I going to get less responsibilities or more shackles? I don't like the idea of that or the sound of that. And they came and they said, well, it's fixed. I'll schedule a meeting and we'll go through what I did so you can learn from that as well. And then when he was walking away, I was like, is that it? Like, is there not going to be any form of punishment? They were like, don't be ridiculous, man. Everyone makes mistakes. And then he shared his story and then he pointed at a colleague and they shared their story. And man, it was such a relief. Like looking back, I'm really happy I was in an environment where it was safe to make mistakes because everyone does it, right? Now that I'm a few more years into it, I've seen so many mistakes. I've made so many mistakes. and how you pick up and recover from that and learn from that, that's incredibly important.
And not just learning from that.
Yeah.
When my team makes mistakes, I push them to tell others about it.
Mm.
And then they grow from it as
Yeah.
well. They become better, educators or they communicators. And I'm like, how can we capitalize on that mistake?
Yeah.
And take it as a topic that they're going to talk for half an hour and explain what happened and what can we do so that it doesn't happen again. It's like, let's reverse this thing. All right, mistake happened. Like, there's nothing we can do about it now. Let's at least grow from it. Not just as an individual, not just as like a one-on-one feedback. Oh, that's fine, man.
Yeah.
How can the rest of the team understand that this mistake can happen to any of them?
Yeah.
And that it's no big deal, but just know what to do so that it doesn't happen again.
I really like that. That's a way for them. You teach them to pay it forward, right?
That's an Air Force mindset.
Is it? Yeah.
They investigate a lot.
Nice.
Yeah. Like when I was at the Air Force, somebody left snack bag in an airplane.
Okay.
And that's like in Air Force terms, it's terrible. It can, get sucked into stuff.
Really?
Some bags have some aluminum in them, and this is conductive sometimes. And you just don't, you want to be sterile. You don't want to ever leave anything behind.
Yeah.
So they just took all of us with a big screen, and they explained what happened, who did it, and the person who did it explained what are the potential risks.
Yeah.
Even if it takes you to the extreme of like an airplane can crash and stuff. Of course, that's aviation. That's not just Air Force. But yeah, I mean, it's not investigating and sharing for the sake of humiliating someone.
Yeah.
It's for the sake of growth.
Yeah. I really like that. That's the best thing you can do. Grow from it, not just as an individual, but as a collective, right? I think I really got lucky when I was in that environment, because I'm on Reddit sometimes, on like programmer subreddits and stuff. And I see people just absolutely get flamed when it happens. And I'm like, man, that is not a good environment to be in, especially very early on in career, right? When you're early on in your career, you want to have a safe environment. You want to have the room to make mistakes. And you want to have good guidance and mentorship as well. Yeah.
That's why hiring the right managers is important.
Exactly, right? You get to pick your manager also. I think people sometimes forget that hiring is a two-way, right? If it's not a good fit from the interviewee's perspective, just be like, well, I don't want to take this job, right? Yeah,
Totally.
It's choosing because there's going to be key people in and around your career along your journey, and you need to make sure they're the right people as well for you and for your career.
Yeah.
Just to step back, when we were talking about growth pains, you mentioned your team naturally split, right? And you said that I felt that it was a good split. But what kind of split are we talking? Is it like a domain? Is it like a technology? Because I've seen different teams function in different ways. And what I really don't like is the technology split.
So I think I was very lucky there. So the first two hires in Abcam Amsterdam were myself and Harris. He came from Google. He was our VP of product, basically.
Yeah.
And here's like also an advice for managers: become best friends with your product folks and your product managers, because you're not just an engineer coding anymore. You need to understand the product really well. And I think that early relationship that we've built helped us understand what are things gonna possibly look like in 3, 4, 5 months.
Yeah.
Domains, right? Order capturing, order resolution. These are like domains that we had. We put them under one umbrella, 2 teams, right?
Yeah.
Searching things, like the whole search domain for life sciences is crazy. The whole kind of landing pages and promotion things. Like we managed to identify those domains, business domains, patterns, deployables, right? And that's kind of how we split the teams. And I have to say, that's one of the smoothest team splittings that I've ever faced.
Okay.
Because product managers were not scared of, when a team splits, like what happens with product manager, right? Do I get this team? Do I get the other team? Like that kind of ego did not exist,
Okay.
which was great. So I wouldn't say it was, I cannot just go and say, hey, folks, we split the teams, because, we need to have some QA resources there.
Yeah.
Who's going to lead that team? Is the potential leader that I have in mind, do they have a good connection with the product manager? Can they work well together?
Yeah.
Is the product manager proficient in their domain? That's more of like a Harris or VP kind of question to answer.
Yeah.
And I think being able to tackle that together and bring engineering and product together really made it easy. So yeah, the teams were split into business domains, independently deployable, microservices, micro front ends, All of them were using like Next.js and React and serverless, and some of them were running on containers as well when it made sense.
Yeah.
But in practice, I mean, if there would be a problem that is like absolutely solvable using a specific language, I'd be down for that. But you would have to convince me.
Yeah.
You would have to convince me, because what I don't want to have is, this can be solved with Go.
So we do it in Go.
But it's going to give us like maybe 1.2 times faster, execution speed. But then you're the only one who knows Go.
Yeah.
And you might go. that's a funny, but you might not be here next year or in half a year. And I want this thing to live. Like, my success as an engineering manager is about developing scalable and maintainable systems that will continue serving the business and scale, and people will come and go, and people should be able to switch around. And that's just easier when you use common technologies. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When you're aligned in a tech, and it's not just an amalgamation of whatever everyone wants to try out.
At serverless, for example, we were using Go for something very, very specific, because execution speed was one of our most important success metrics. Yeah. And the business knew that we are ready to invest in folks knowing this, so that we're able to maintain this, because that will be our competitive edge. Yeah, some of it, right?
That's really cool.
So it really depends on the business that you're in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm really happy you said the domain split, because what I've seen is when you want a dedicated team, they need a clear goal, right? And they need to have ownership over the whole process. If their ownership is not there, if their end station is like, oh, we put it on test, then there's this empty kind of thing that is not fulfilled for them, because they're like, what does it matter, right? Because then weeks down end, they'll hear, oh, your feature's live, and they'll be like, I've already moved on since, man. Like, it's gone.
For me, engineering teams must be, owners of their domain.
Yeah.
If they cannot own their domain, then perhaps we're oversplitting, because somebody said it's like a 2-pizza team and we must split because, that's the Amazon rule or something. They must own their domain.
Yeah.
They must understand the product. They need to understand like what's on the roadmap. They need to spend time with the designer or designers. They need to do all the triaging and 3 amigos and all those sessions to understand how is the user going to use this thing.
Yeah.
How do we test it? Is it right for unit testing? Is it right for end-to-end testing? I like it when engineers do automation as well. Mm-hmm. What kind of infrastructure do we need for this? What I don't want to have is engineers creating a task on Jira for some platform infrastructure team that has to wait for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Just go onto the Terraform code and set up the database. And if you don't know how to do that, then I'll help you or put somebody who knows how to do it with you.
Collaborate.
So the next time you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's how teams move fast. Like, I've worked for, like, it's strange for me to imagine that, but like front end and back end teams. This is something that used to be pretty popular a few years ago.
Absolutely.
How did this even work? Did it even work? I guess, I don't know. I mean,
we've evolved, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, you got to own your stuff. And at Appcom, for example, I've had an engineering enablement team, because I did acknowledge that some things are like tight dependencies, right? Like a UI library for us to share across our front ends. Great, let's put 1 or 2 folks there who are passionate about UI, who do a great job, are great communicators, can understand the needs of the teams and help them work on UI libraries. And I would do some rotation as well, so that everybody gets to contribute to that UI library. So on a bi-weekly basis, it would swap. And yeah, I mean, ownership. You got to be able to take something end-to-end, deploy it, and maintain it as a team. Otherwise, I don't know. I've not seen it working any other way.
As effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. As one of the final thoughts I have is, so for engineers that are engineers now, but have aspirations to go into that leadership role, either technical or managerial, because I think I fit into that category myself. I was talking to you before the show. But if I were to jump in, let's say, in an engineering manager role, my role would completely shift, right? I would have no clue what I would do day to day. Sure, I have some form of vision, but I'm 100% sure it would be misaligned with the people I would actually be managing. What is some advice you would give into people that have those aspirations, so they can already have like a little dabble in that, and it doesn't have to be a plunge and sink or swim?
So again, I've not read any leadership books, but I'm going to try to give my advice based on what I did to get into leadership, but also what I would expect from leaders in my team. First of all, regardless of that, if you have a manager that you appreciate, try to identify what you appreciate about them. I can say, gladly say I've never had a terrible manager.
Okay.
every single one of my managers, I loved a lot about them. Very different things, by the way, in every one of them. But I also didn't like some things about them. And I think you understanding and analyzing what do I want to take from this person and this manager, and what do I not want to take from this person, is a great practice to have. Secondly, ask them to delegate some tasks to you. I've always asked my managers when I wasn't sure if I want to go into leadership, technical leadership, management. I asked them, can you let me do something that's like non-confidential, that's going to help you? Because the best leaders, they help take off weight from their leaders. And they do it by earning trust and being accountable and being responsible and being able to, have bias for action and just drive change. So I wanted to prove and prove myself as well, right? That I'm kind of made of that material my manager will be like, wow, like I just got a lot more free time to take care of other problems because this person took leadership of and ownership of some process, right? In terms of you think, so obviously engineers always look for the next step, right? And after you're a senior engineer, depending on the organization, you could go staff, principal, engineering manager. I would say it's not like a ladder that you have to go through, right? So for either role, whether you're going for technical leadership or people management, you need to be a leader.
Yeah.
And that's something that is important. Now, not everybody knows if they're a leader, right? That's certainly something that can be developed. Like some of the best leaders I've worked with were not like naturally born this way. I certainly wasn't. Like I really wasn't. As a child, I was not.
Yeah.
I was like the last person to be picked for football, also because I was terrible at football, but you gotta understand that going for management, it's a new career.
Yeah.
Like you need to know how to work with people. You need to learn that. It's like you go to the office every day for years and you open VS Code and code. As a manager, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You need to remember their problems. You need to be very organized. You need to know how to be, sorry for the term, but a shit umbrella.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of shit going on in an organization and you want to shield your teams from that shit so that they can focus and be productive, right? And these are things that people often think, wow, my next step is a manager. I love my manager. I want to be like that. You need to understand if that's right for you. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but it's a different career path. And, on the other hand, technical leadership, you're going to have the ability. You're going to have folks who are super talented with you, very technical. Somebody might join your company and he's done things that are greater than what you've done from a technical perspective. But, you are the leader. And on the one hand, you want to know how to listen to people. On the other hand, you're going to know how to deal with like biased personalities sometimes, people who have something against a certain technology and are like a very, very vocal people, or just people who know how to argue really well but don't know anything about that technology. Like you got to know how to lead and how to get buy-ins from people as a leader. Like that's super important. As an organization grows, you got to know how to get buy-ins from people. If you want to introduce a change, you want to do it in a way that people, even though they might not always agree with it, they feel safe around it. They feel like it's going to bring the company and the team into a more like productive place. And I think that's kind of, there are common things between people management and technical leadership is you got to be a leader. You got to identify the stars. You got to help those who need help, identify those who need help, make the right decisions, know when is the right time to do things, when's the right time not to do things, know how to talk to people and get their buy-ins, and set an example. I think that's the most important thing. Set an example because everybody's going to look up to you and you want to be that person who steps into a room when two engineers are having a conflict, whether you're a principal engineer or an engineering manager, and you want to instill a sense of safety and like, all right, guys, let's just make a decision. And is this one day? This is just one day. We're going to be here for many months and years. Let's just put this behind us.
Yeah, I love hearing that, man. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but the one that sticks with me the most is taking a little bit of your manager, right? A little bit of their load and allowing them to delegate and gaining that trust in that way and being more comfortable in doing those tasks because they're probably going to be completely new is a really good way and a small step towards what you probably want to do. Or you can learn that is actually not for you, right? If you try and figure out something and you're like, man, this is really boring, or like, is this really what they do? That's knowledge, right? That's experience. And you can do that, I think, both on more people-oriented managers as well as technical leaders in that way as well. Really cool, man. I love how this conversation flowed. Is there anything you still want to share?
No, I had a lot of fun. Super fun, exactly as I imagined it to be. I mean, I've watched a few of your episodes and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, thanks for having me here.
Awesome, man. Thanks as well. I don't know which camera because we switched position. I'm going to take that one. I'm going to put all Ariel's stuff in the description below. Check him out. Let him know you came from our show. And thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.